Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha with Ice Cream Fitness here. And once again, it is time for the Gear Talk with Jason Q&A series. And yes, my shirt says what you think it says. But hold on, let me give you guys a bicep shot first. Alright, let's get right into these questions. First question. Is it safe to use Nova for gyno while using tren? Alright, I don't know where this rumor got started, but because nandrolone and trenbolone can both cross-bind to progestin receptors, and someone came up with some data showing that Nolvadex might increase progestin sensitivity, that people came up with this idea that Nolvadex on tren or nandrolone would give you gyno. And this is the farthest thing from the truth. It's perfectly fine to use with tren, and if anything, you should probably be using tren with Nolvadex because of the simple fact that the Nolvadex will improve your lipid profiles and tren tend to just drive them rock bottom. So if anything, I recommend people who are running tren at least 2 or 3 times a week to pop a 20 milligram Nolvadex anyways, just for health purposes. Because the SARM-like nature of it, it binds to the liver like estrogen and it can improve your lipid profile. So this whole idea that you can't stack them together, that it's going to give you gyno, is just absurd, and it's just simply not true. Alright, next question. Good protocol for long-term blasting cruises. Dosage, how do you go about maintaining once you're at your goal, and doses needed to maintain? Alright, this gets tricky because your blast should obviously be based around your goals and what you're trying to do. But as far as cruising, I generally recommend for most people something like anywhere from 6 to 10 week blasts, unless they're running something like Boldenon, which I would tell them run it up to 16 to 20, followed by cruises of at least equal length. So, or longer, whatever it takes to get your blood work straight, or you can just cruise until you're ready to make big gains again. And cruising, I'm going to say for most people, is going to be anywhere from 200 milligrams of testosterone a week up to about 500, or combinations of it with other milder anabolics. The main thing you're looking for is on a cruise is that you want your health markers to return to a more acceptable range. If you're not concerned with any of that, then you would just blast you around. Why would you ever use less than a gram of test? If your goal is to just get big and use with no concern for health. So the cruising, the whole point is to get all of the benefits that people who cycle are trying to get as far as their health markers. So you run a nice little dose, or you could add in a little bit of Primo or a little bit of Equipoise or something that's very mild on your system with a low dose of testosterone, and try to get your health sorted while still getting enough androgens in your system to maintain what you've gained from the gear. But that's my general recommendation. 6 to 10 week blast followed by 6 to 10 week cruises. Usually you want to cruise at least 8 weeks though, even if you did a 6-week blast. Or you can cruise even longer. Again, going back to how often do you want to make big gains again. Alright, next question. Does Anavar have a minimum cycle length to go along with a minimum 50 milligram dosage for males? Guys seem to be either overdosing past the point of diminishing returns or not buying enough of it to be worth their time. As far as cycle length goes, I'm not a fan of cycle lengths, but we can go back to the same blasting information I just gave. You have to remember that orals hit your system fast, and they start to cause more side effects the longer you stay on. Things like lipid profiles, elevated liver enzymes, and other problems. Now, Anavar doesn't have necessarily the same liver toxicity component that other orals do, but it does have the issue of it driving your HDL rock bottom. And if you stay on it 10 or 12 weeks, your blood work is going to look terrible unless you're on a very, very low dose, like a lot of females would run, something like 10 milligrams, which is not going to do anything really for a male. So the obvious answer for that is probably 6 to 8 weeks of Anavar. Now, as far as the dosing goes, yeah, that's the problem with Anavar. Anavar is very expensive. A lot of people who, if you're on a budget, a tight budget, Anavar is not the drug for you. And honestly, 50 milligrams is around what I would consider to be the minimum really effective dose for Anavar, maybe 40. But anything below that is simply not worth your time, and you don't really start seeing truly diminished returns on it till you go past about 100 milligrams a day. Yeah, and in all honesty, 100 milligrams a day of Anavar, particularly when combined with just a little bit of test or some other harder androgen, will produce pretty serious results. I think you'd be shocked. It doesn't necessarily give you the diminished returns you're thinking of. Now, when you start going past that, not only are we getting into diminished returns, we're getting into problems with cost effectiveness. You would just be better off adding something else to your stack at that point rather than dumping more money on more Anavar, because you're already getting pretty well the benefits of it you're going to get. You're just adding a more androgenic component and more gains by adding more milligrams. You would probably just want to add more testosterone or something like Boldenone or something else mild just to get more gains, not necessarily add more Anavar past about 100 milligrams, because just the diminished returns versus the cost ratio are terrible at that point. And most people can't even afford, especially younger guys, can't really afford 100 milligram a day Anavar stack. All right, next question. Test and trend. Can you only take one or the other since they're said to fight for the same receptors? No, this is again a bit of a misconception. Most people stack test with their trend, and in fact, very few people seem to really do well or get away with a trend only stack with no testosterone. A lot of guys don't really get the gains they think they're going to get out of it. You're going to tend to suffer more psychological issues. You may even have impotence issues and other problems, and it varies from person to person. Now, the thing is, on the other extreme, a lot of people want to stack a high dose of both. And I see guys who say, well, I use a gram of test and a gram of tren a week. And I'm like, yeah, but I promise you, you're suffering some serious side effects on that. And anyone who says that they're not is either getting fake gear or they are lying. That sort of stack is extremely high side effect. And it's also extremely conservative by modern top-level bodybuilding standards. As crazy as that sounds. What that comes down to is, yes, they compete for receptors, but if you're, say, running 500 tests and 500 tren a week, you have enough androgen receptors for all of that to bind to. That's not necessarily a problem in that regard. What you do have, though, is that the tren tends to get first pass at the receptors because it has such a higher receptor binding affinity. And so what tends to happen is that, in my experience and the experience of a lot of others, the amount of testosterone you run with your tren seems to be the dominant factor in how many side effects you get. And it's because since the tren leaves the test floating in the bloodstream just a little longer before it binds, it tends to exacerbate any of the side effects you get from the test, because it just has more time to bind to the aromatase enzyme or the 5-alpha reductase enzyme, things that convert it into other compounds. It seems to happen a little stronger when it's stacked with tren. Plus the fact that tren seems to increase certain sensitivities for estrogen receptors and things due to its progesteronic nature. So it can be tricky as far as stacking the two together, and the way a lot of guys get around this, particularly a lot of Eastern European lifters and Russian lifters, is they run a lot of tren with just a little bit of test, like 150, 200, 250 milligrams of test, and they'll run pretty heavy doses of tren, and they use just enough test to amplify the anabolic effect and to keep their libido high and keep their mood normal, and then they use the tren to do the real work. And that's a common method used there. Or people oftentimes will run their test higher than their tren to try to keep side effects down. But again, I personally think running the tren higher is the best way to keep side effects down. But in that case, they're running a test dominant stack and then using the tren in it just for the tren's ability to enhance the gains, or to add some of tren's properties such as hardening you up or fat burning or other things that it does. Alright, last question. How accurate are you when spotting out who's natural and who's not? If you have personal conversations with 15 people and 2 were unnatural, do you believe you would 100% detect the 2 enhanced guys? Is it a matter of conversing or appearance or both that set your detector off? It's a combination of factors. In all honesty, when I'm looking oftentimes at a natural bodybuilding show, oh yeah, I can pick out guys right down the road. I can look at a guy and say, that guy is using growth hormone right up to the show. That guy is using some sort of DHT stack. He's either on Anavar or Masteron or both. That guy's stacking tren with some sort of DHT derivative. And it's because they're just very characteristic looks. I can tell who's using diuretics. I can tell who can't. And anybody with a trained eye can look right down that lineup and tell you that. And there are a lot of them. And I'm not personally in the business of calling people out. I mean, that is their business. I'm just not in that game. I don't care if they're using or not. I just really and truly don't. But yeah, it's the same thing. We definitely have guys on YouTube who claim natural who are juicing their fucking brains out. But you're never going to see me call them out. It's just not the way I'm going to be. But yeah, I can look down that list. It's the same thing when I converse with guys. You just get a feel for things when you start chatting with them as to how much they really know about gear, whether they use or not. There are just certain tip-offs that you can pick up in conversing with them. And it was the same thing when I told you guys with Chris Jones from conversing with him. I really get the impression that Chris doesn't really know very much about gear. And I don't think he's ever used any. He would not be able to get the conditioning and results he gets from using gear due to his lack of knowledge of how to use gear. So you're dealing with a case with him of he just trains really hard and has good genetics. But on the other hand, what I also find is that when I'm dealing with people who are drug-free power lifters or who are natural bodybuilders, when it's just the guys talking and I'm chatting with them and I kind of pull the thing of, oh man, don't bullshit me like that. All right, you know, you can bullshit your fans, you can bullshit the kids, but this is me you're talking to. I'm not fucking stupid. And a lot of times they'll go ahead and just come clean with your chatting and they'll talk with you a little bit about what they use. So you'd be surprised when they realize that you are in the know and they can't really bullshit you, that you really do know what you're talking about as far as gear goes, you know what you're looking at, you know they're on. They'll talk to you about what they use as long as you're cool about it. But those same guys, if one of their fans who doesn't know a lot about it talks with them, they're going to hold their natural line. So just keep that in mind. There's a few different things going on that I use personally to determine it, and it's not really that useful of a tool for me since I'm not in the business of calling them out. Alright guys, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it has been informative, and I will talk to you next time.